We're ready to start? Okay. My name is Maya Wiley. I am President and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, the nation's oldest and largest civil rights coalition, over 240 national organizations strong, and we have so many of them here standing behind us today. But it is I would call it my great privilege, but I would say it's actually all of our responsibilities to thank our senators who are here today, who are reintroducing the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act today. I say obligation for a reason. As we stand here 75 years old, going into the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, a piece of legislation that back then was bipartisan, not without a fight, but it was bipartisan. And every single reauthorization of a bill that was a law that kept getting repassed that said every single voter deserves the right to vote, and no person in power should be able to take that right away. Not if you're black, not if you're Latino, not if you're Asian American, Pacific Islander, not if you're Native American, not if you're anybody. But we have also known that in this country, as much bipartisan support as we have had for the very tenets, the very foundation of our democracy, we have had to fight for it every single day since we won it in 1965. But today is different. Today is different because in all our past fights, we have had a much broader cross-section of leaders who understood that if we don't protect everyone's right to vote, we don't protect anyone's right to vote. And never have we seen that play out more right now in an administration that is not just disemboweling the very parts of government the civil rights movement fought for and won to protect our rights, that it is also using that power to say we will try to federalize voter suppression. We will try to pass legislation that we will fight every step of the way that says you have to prove you're a citizen of these United States, even though our states already have ways to do that. That the impact of this is already being felt because we have a captured Supreme Court. And I don't mind calling that out, because we have an ideological majority that has said, what precedent, what case law, what 40 years of protections that we have recognized do you think we won't hide behind an emergency docket to undermine? This is not normal. It is not something we have had to confront in all our 60 years after 100 years post-slavery of fighting for this Voting Rights Act. But it is also something that I will tell you right now. When people say, why have the Senate Judiciary Committee reintroduced the John Lewis Voting Rights Act now? Why do it now? Well, I'll tell you why. Because today and every day it matters. When we talk about whether people are going to be able to see a doctor when they're sick and have their Medicaid, the Voting Rights Act matters. 60% of black children are going to lose medical care unless we do something about it. And it's not just that. And I won't go through the whole list because you don't have time and senators are here and hot. But I will say this. We won't stop. We had to fight 100 years for the Voting Rights Act, and just because we're 60 years in on an anniversary where we have an administration that wants to block us from the ballot, we march on, we rise, and we say, no, you won't take us back. No, you can't, because we won't let you. And we will be here every single Congress we need to be, and we will be in the streets where we need to be. We will be protecting rights when we need to protect rights, and right now that is every single day. So these 200 organizations, these powerful senators that stand on principle, that stand on civil rights, that lead a country that says we want everyone to vote, and that we won't stand for anything that takes us backward. That we say here today, we will celebrate the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act by doing what John Lewis taught us. Good trouble. Yeah. Right? Am I right? Yeah. Good trouble. Where are we going to fight? Congress. Where else are we going to fight? State houses. What else are we going to do? Fight every single day and in every single way. So it is my tremendous honor to introduce to you our Majority Leader, Senator Schumer, a senator from Brooklyn, I might add.
Brooklyn, New York.
Thank you, Senator Schumer.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you. And it's great to be here, and I thank Maya for her inspiring words. I want to thank Senator Warnock. What a great beacon he has been in so many different ways, and he's our lead sponsor of the John Lewis Act. I want to thank Senator Durbin for being here, Senator Padilla, Senator Blumenthal, Senator Booker is expected, and our great partners, the Leadership Council on Civil Rights, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and so many others, 200 groups, and that's good trouble. And that's not just an inspirational phrase. Nope, it's a challenge to every one of us, especially at these times when our democracy is being taken away, when it's at risk, when we see so many terrible things happen, the Justice Department being weaponized. Instead of keeping us safe, it's just going after Trump's political enemies, real and imagined. And so it's been clear. When we fight for democracy, when we protect democracy, we got to fight fire with fire. We're not going to stand idly by, as Maya said. We're not going to let them revert to Jim Crow. And if you don't think they want to revert to Jim Crow, just look what they did in the SAVE Act, which went back to took Jim Crow for the whole nation. By so making it hard, they said you need ID, and they made it so hard to show ID that probably half the people in America couldn't vote. We wouldn't let it pass. Democrats, they needed our vote. They went to court. Many of us, Durbin, myself, and others, were lead plaintiffs, and we beat them in court. But it shows why we need legislation, because these guys are undoing everything in every way they can. They don't want poor people to vote. They don't want people of color to vote. They don't want Democrats to vote. They don't believe in democracy. We do. And so we see what they do to people everywhere. A heinous act of legislation, great ugly betrayal, taking away people's health care, taking food out of the mouths of hungry children to give billionaires a tax break. Shame on them. I can't believe it. No principle, no conscience. Shame. 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 When American people are angry, and it's righteous anger, they have made it harder to vote throughout the decades. The Republican Party, now accentuated by the awful MAGA group, they are doing all of this stuff. So I am proud to stand here. I'm going to cut my remarks short because it is hot. But no amount of heat is going to stop us from getting this done. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate everybody being here. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Now, on that note of bringing the heat, we bring forward Senator Warnock, who has been such a powerful leader, a powerful man of faith, and a voice for civil rights writ large and for our Voting Rights Act.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and let's give Maya Wiley a great big round of applause. Thank you, Maya, for your leadership, for your passion, for your voice. I'm grateful to be here with my colleagues, grateful to Senator Schumer, Senator Blumenthal, Senator Padilla, but I especially want to honor and thank our ranking member, Dick Durbin. Senator Durbin has been a voting rights champion for his entire Senate career, and he's someone that I've been deeply honored to work alongside. He understands the importance of this work, and I'm just grateful that I've been able to work alongside him and so many of my colleagues, especially on this issue, since I came to the Senate in 2021. Senator Durbin, you leave big shoes to fill, but we salute you and we thank you for your work. Give Senator Durbin a great big round of applause. As I often say, a vote is a kind of prayer for the world we desire for ourselves and for our children. And our prayers are stronger when we pray together. Democracy is the political enactment of a spiritual idea. This notion that each of us has within ourselves a spark of the divine. If you're not given to that kind of language, simply put it this way: we all have value. And if we all have value, we ought to have a voice in the direction of our country. We ought to have a vote. And so with all of the problems that are facing our country, none is more important and none is more urgent than our voting rights, than preserving the democracy. Nothing is more important right now than passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and we need to get that done now. Healthcare is critical. Climate change, as we stand in this heat. Whole range of issues. Workforce development, people's prosperity, housing. But here's the thing: voting rights are preservative of all other rights. The democracy is the very house in which we live. It is the framework in which we get to fight for the things that we care about. There's so many places all around the world where you don't get to fight. You don't get to use your voice in the way that we have taken for granted, and these last 7 months have reminded us that we ought not take any of it for granted. We are literally in a fight for the life of the republic. We're in a fight to make sure that everybody has a voice and that we don't give in to the authoritarian movement that is afoot right now in our country. So much is at stake. And right now, even as we stand here pushing this John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, lawmakers in Texas are being called back into a special session. Think about that. In Texas, in the middle of July, they're going back into session in order to redraw the maps in the middle of the decade. Not only are they saying the quiet part out loud, they are acting on it with a vengeance in real time. And so just think about that. The very folk who just took health care away from 16 million Americans, the very people who just passed legislation that will cause just about everybody's health care premiums to go up, about 20 million Americans, are now busy trying to make sure that those Americans do not have the ability to fire them. They've deprived people of a doctor, and now they're trying to doctor the voting maps. That's why we have to pass the Voting Rights Advancement Act, and we need to do it now. And so instead of representing the people's needs, they are spending the next year and a half trying to redraw the lines, squeezing the people out of their democratic system so they no longer have a vote and a voice. This is what you call turning democracy upside down. So that rather than the people choosing their representatives, politicians get to pick their own people. This has always been a bipartisan piece of legislation. The last time it passed, George W. Bush, a Republican, was president. It passed the Senate without a single no vote. And the question becomes, what has changed? And so times are tough, but we are not about to give up on passing the Voting Rights Act. I live in Atlanta, and because I live in Atlanta, I'm used to this heat. But also because I live in Atlanta, I walk among civil rights giants every single day. And right about now, I think about my friend Ambassador Andrew Young, who worked alongside John Lewis. And Andy Young tells a story that I think about a lot these days. He said that when they passed the Civil Rights Bill into law, Martin Luther King Jr. went with his lieutenants to meet with the president. And as they sat to meet with President Johnson, and Dr. King began to say, "Mr. President, we need a voting rights law." The president said, I know, you're right. It'd be great to get that done, but I can't get that done right now. I've already had to spend too much political capital just getting the Civil Rights Bill over the finish line. There's no way, Martin, I just don't have the power to do it right now. The President of the United States kept saying over and over again, I just don't have the power. When they left the meeting, the staff was feeling all dejected, and they said, what are we going to do now? The president says he doesn't have the power. And Dr. King looked at the staff and he said, well, if the president doesn't have the power, I guess we're going to have to go and find the president some power. And so that's why all of these groups that are standing behind me are so important, because we understand this is not about the people in power. It's about the power that's in the people. And so we're not about to wait until the next election to try to pass voting rights. We need to pass voting rights right now. You ready to get this done? Are you ready to hold every politician accountable to make sure that the people have their voice? Keep the faith and keep looking up.
Well, I don't know about you, but I know who has power. We do. I also know what fearless leadership looks like, and we're hearing from it, and we're going to hear from more. And so our ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, who needs no introduction, who's been a fearless leader in his own right, a cherished leader for the civil rights community, Richard Durbin.
When I woke up this morning, I said a little prayer that the Lord would help me and to make sure today that I didn't have to follow Reverend Warnock. My prayer was not answered, but what a great speech he gave. And thank you for the kind words, and Maya, thank you for being here. I'm not going to give this speech. I'm going to tell you a story. The story is about a man who used to tell a story about preaching to chickens. Remember that story? Yes. It was John Lewis learning how to become a public speaker by preaching to the chickens in the chicken shed. And boy, did he make a mark. There was a day years ago when I was still a member of the Senate, but a very new member of the Senate, when I was invited to take the civil rights pilgrimage with John Lewis and go down south and see some of the places that made history in the 60s and 70s in America. And something called me back to Illinois on Sunday, and I couldn't stick around. We were supposed to go to the Edmund Pettus Bridge. There's a photo over here. In Selma, Alabama. It broke my heart because I wanted to do that. John heard about it and he said, I'll take you over there. We'll go at 6 in the morning so you can still catch your plane. We made a special trip over there, and it was a moment of my public life I'll never forget. I walked down that Edmund Pettus Bridge right next to John Lewis, and he told me the story of that day when he was in Selma. You know the story, we all know it. Do you remember that man in the white trench coat with the backpack on, who was with those who were marching, and he reached a point where someone came along and bashed him in the head and knocked him to the ground? He told me about that story, but he said something else to me. He said, you know, we never would have had a chance for the March on Selma, never would have had that chance if it wasn't for a federal judge by the name of Frank Johnson. Frank Johnson gave us a permit to make that march. He paid for it dearly. His mother's home was firebombed as a result of it. But he had the courage to stand up and give us that chance to march. So I always felt bad about being bashed in the head, but I knew that we made history and we did it because of that judge. I remember that story, and I went out and bought a biography of Frank Johnson, so I know a little bit more about him, what he did. He was a courageous man, a thoughtful man. And I've given a copy of that biography to 8 members of the Supreme Court, hoping that 1 or 2 of them would actually read it and believe it as I do. I tell each one of them, you have the power to change history by giving the people of this country a voice. Frank Johnson did it, and did it at great political peril, but he did it. And now comes our turn, gathered in this sun, gathered in this heat, to rededicate ourselves to that man who preached to the chickens, that man who led the Edmund Pettus Bridge pilgrimage, that man who inspired us in our lives. when you're a citizen of the United States, your most cherished weapon is your vote. Most cherished weapon is your vote. And when you're in control of the power of this country and you want to hold people back, hold back their votes. It's all about the vote. The Voting Rights Act made it clear that we were not going to discriminate against people when it comes to voting power, and we know what Shelby County did. We're back in that station again. I'm happy to join Reverend Warnock and my colleagues here today to tell you that, John Lewis, we remember you, we love you, we're going to be engaged in some good trouble in your name, and we wish you the very best. Let me at this point introduce my friend from the state of Connecticut, Richard Blumenthal.
Senator Booker here.
Oh, Senator Booker. Well, you want to introduce him? I know something about him too.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Senator Blumenthal. I'm sorry, I apologize.
What can I say about Cory Booker?
No, Senator Blumenthal, you were right.
What can I
was
say
wrong.
about what can I say about Senator Blumenthal? All I can tell you, he's a great U.S. attorney. He was a great state attorney general, and he's a great member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut.
Thank you. And I want to be Senator Booker when I grow up. I'm really proud to be introduced by a great champion, and my little prayer this morning was not to have to follow Maya Wally as speaker. What a great leader. But, you know, we're surrounded by leaders here. And I want to thank every single one of you for being here today. And to my colleagues in the United States Senate, let me just say, this is what America looks like.
That's right.
This is what America looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Every person gets a vote. What are you scared of?
Yes.
What do you fear in giving people a vote? Why are you trying to suppress people from going to the polls? What's your apprehension about people going to the vote and expressing themselves? And, you know, I've been watching John Lewis while we've been talking here, and his stare is unrelenting. He's going to hold us accountable. He's going to make sure we do the right thing today. When John Lewis walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, his only body armor was his courage. His only weapon was his conviction. His main advantage was his conscience. Conscience, courage, conviction. That's what we need today in the United States Congress. We need people with the spine and backbone to stand up to Donald Trump. My Republicans ought to grow a backbone and tell us they have nothing to fear from people going to the polls, that they're proud of America. The America that we've seen in this administration is rolling back rights. For the first time in American history, there'll be less health care, there'll be less education, there'll be less voting rights. That is un-American. And let me just say about this bill, it not only establishes or reestablishes pre-clearance. I'm not going to make you stand here while I tell you the legal import of pre-clearance. It not only establishes certification so that voting is honest, it also gives a private right of action. So people can not only go to the polls, they can go to the courts and get a remedy when their votes are suppressed. That is profoundly important, and we need to make sure that this mandate is made a matter of law. So let me just say finally, we're here to turn up the heat, literally. Hot as it is, we're here to turn it up. Maya is right. We're going to fight in the Congress, we're going to fight in the House, we're going to fight in the Senate and the state legislatures, but we also need to fight in the streets and the neighborhoods. We need to go to our fellow Americans because, you know, it's a funny thing about Americans. They basically believe in fairness. They basically believe in the right to vote. It's the reason why we have an America. It's the reason for our revolution. We need to go to the streets. We need a revolution against Donald Trump. Not violence, but the kind of peaceful, resistance that John Lewis believed in when he marched across that bridge. Good trouble. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Booker, who needs no introduction, has promised he will not speak for more than 25 hours. And I can't imagine a person I'd rather listen to for 26 hours. Senator.
Sweaty kiss. I will take a sweaty kiss from Maya any day of the week. So we are here today. I'm thinking as I'm standing there next to a Jewish American. I'm standing next to this extraordinary Latino American, this African American, this descendant from European immigrants. And this was not necessarily what the founders had in mind when our Constitution was framed. But the framework of these imperfect geniuses allowed for something really important, that the power of the people would always be greater than the people in power, and that if you trust the people, if you believe in the people, if you elevate, celebrate, and empower the people with the right to vote, our democracy in every generation would make a more perfect union. They didn't guarantee us that we wouldn't have to fight, that we wouldn't have to have challenges of authoritarianism, that we wouldn't see lurches off the pathway of promise. But they told us if we were willing to do the hard work generation after generation of democracy, that even when things went wrong, we could heal, we could repair, we could redeem, and continue down that pathway. We are here today because they were there then. They were there at Seneca Falls. They were there in Selma. They were there at Stonewall. We are here because of that kind of patriotism. People that chose patriotism over politics. People that chose hope even though they had heartache. People who chose that even when they were knocked down to get up again because they knew that the cause of justice was worthy and demanded sacrifice. And so here we are again at another crossroads in our country where we are challenged to honor our traditions. We have a president who has decided that he wants to be king. We have a president who wants to overcome the very Constitution that he and we swore an oath to uphold. We see the realities here. The ugliness, the meanness, the cruelty, the corruption. We now have to show a different way. As they attack voting rights and attack free speech rights and attack literally our due process rights as masked people in unmarked cars sweep folks off of the streets without justice. We stand here in the shadow of heroes like John Lewis who are calling upon us to step into our light so that we too can shine for generations to come. This act, this bill, has a sense of urgency, necessity, vitality. It is critical if our democracy is going to continue to thrive. And so I say this to all those who stand with me in this heat, like they did in the hot summers in Mississippi, as they did in the hot summers in Alabama, as they did in the freedom summers that led to our freedom. I stand with you all today in dedication and commitment that in this time of darkness, each and every one of us, the foot soldiers of justice, will be brilliant, will be light workers, and will find a way forward so that we too can join arms with our brothers and sisters and say with resolute conviction that we shall overcome. Thank you.
Last and far from least, something that I want to call out is Senator Padilla may be one of the most notable for being willing to put his body on the line for rights, for justice, and for oversight. Senator Padilla.
Imagine that, a senator wanted to ask a question. Imagine that, a senator wanted to do his or her job of providing that oversight and accountability for an administration. That's why I'm here today, That's why we're all here today. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for your willingness to stand up for our democracy. We don't give up that easy. We stand up, we speak up when necessary. It's an honor for me to do my part in supporting the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and not just because I considered John Lewis a friend, as many of us did. He was a hero of mine, but because he reminded us that our vote, while sacred, was never guaranteed. Our right to vote survives because good people continue to show up, to speak out, and to cause good trouble when necessary. And we could all use a little bit of John Lewis's courage right now to push back on this administration's brazen attacks on our right to vote. You've heard it before. Blatant partisan gerrymandering being directed from the south lawn of the White House. Never would I have imagined, but that's what we're up against. The weaponization of the Department of Justice, and specifically their voting rights section, to set up the purging of voter rolls. And the Trump administration encouraging, egging on election deniers in every corner of the country. We may be up against a lot, but we know we have a lot to offer. That's why Senator Durbin and I are co-leading a spotlight forum tomorrow to shed light on the coordinated voter suppression playbook and to sound the alarm before it's too late. We'll have as one of our witnesses former Attorney General Eric Holder. You might have heard of him. He had a front row seat to the Shelby case, when in 2013 the Supreme Court got it wrong and undid the teeth of the Voting Rights Act. As he'll tell the right perspective, it doesn't have to be this way. The John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act will put the teeth back into the Voting Rights Act of 1965 because we saw the evidence. For 50 years, the law stood, the preclearance requirements stood, the teeth stood to protect our right to vote. And we'll put it back in when we pass this bill. And we'll build a firewall against other attacks on our right to vote. So next week marks the anniversary of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Now, 60 years later, voting rights remain under attack. So how can we live up to the legacy of the great John Lewis? How can we, this generation, not just of elected leaders, but the true leaders, the organizers and the advocates, live up to the legacy of the man that many people refer to as the conscience of Congress? Let me tell you how we can do that. We can organize, we can mobilize, and we can pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Thank you.
We like to say that we know what civil rights leadership looks like, and you just saw it. And before I introduce my sister in the struggle, I want to do one other thing. I want to give you a little surprise because I'm asking another sister in the struggle to speak after Janae, Melanie Campbell, who's here, who does the work every day. But before I do, I also want to show you what the senators were talking about when they talked about power to get this done. Because we have the LDF, the Legal Defense Fund, my alma mater, representing us in courts. But we also have the National Coalition for Black Civic Participation, who is knocking the doors and empowering people to get them out. We have our union leaders, our AFT, which understands that when we vote, we're voting for our public education and our teachers who teach our children. We have faith leaders because we have sojourners here. We have the Franciscan Justice Leadership Conference here. We have probably others I haven't named, so don't hate on me because it is hot out here. But these are just a sum of what we mean when we say we're not going back, when we say we're in every zip code, when we say we look like America and we are a majority of this country. And to give you a little taste of just how we also fight in the black community, because we are talking about the history of black liberation struggle that they don't want us to learn in our schools. As we talk about women who we're trying to make harder for women of any race to vote, or people with disabilities who live in every community and are in every race, and all of the things we hold dear. I just want to introduce someone who is a friend, but someone who also is bad, and that's good. Janae Nelson, head of the LDF.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you, everyone, for being out here and bearing this heat. I just want to acknowledge that we are standing in between the Capitol and the Supreme Court. A Supreme Court that held last century that the right to vote is preservative of all rights. And a Congress that then passed the Voting Rights Act with bipartisan support and reauthorized it continually as recently as 2006. That is now, both institutions have now turned their back on the right to vote in palpable ways. And all I can say is that we, the people, have to fight back. What are they afraid of? Are they afraid of our votes? Are they afraid of our voices, our opinions, our thoughts, our desires that we can only communicate through the right to vote? This must be a revolution of values that takes us back to core principles that establishes that the right to vote is sacrosanct. It is not to be tampered with. It is not to be manipulated. It is not to be undermined by gerrymandering and by systems that make your vote worthless and not count. And that is what the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act is meant to do. This Supreme Court held in 2013 that the Voting Rights Act needed to be updated. It is now 2025. And Congress has introduced the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act time and time again. And we have not yet had a Congress courageous enough to pass it. A Congress that believed enough in its own principles and platforms and arguments that it could say, yes, people, vote on what we suggest is the right policy because we believe that maybe we could get the votes. It is only because there's a belief that the majority of the people need to be governed by a minority of elected officials who do not have your best interests in mind, that you see a continual denial of the Voting Rights Act being passed. But we're here to say no more, because there may have been a belief that this was only to benefit black people or to benefit people of color or minorities or language minorities, but we know that the Voting Rights Act is the birth certificate of America. It is what made us a multiracial democracy. It is what sustains us as a multiracial democracy. And without it, we see the unraveling of our democracy. We see a system where politicians are picking voters as opposed to what it should be, we the voters choosing our politicians, choosing our representatives. It is no longer a representative form of government if we cannot choose representatives on fair lines and fair maps through fair processes and procedures. So today we stand united and we say you must pass the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And we want everyone to galvanize behind this effort to call their senators and demand passage of this act. I want to thank Ranking Member Durbin and Senator Warnock for introducing this legislation on the eve of the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. This is now our leg of the race. It is now our Voting Rights Act to protect and to expand and to strengthen, to make sure that the next generation of Americans has a right to vote that will not be trampled on, that will protect our democracy and make it deliver to the people. Thank you.
You know, Melanie Campbell, who leads the National Coalition for Black Civic Participation, is a sister I have been fortunate enough to knock on doors in Florida. When I say we're national organizations that look like America, we're also people in the streets, people in community, and people doing the work to help people vote and get that vote out. So Melanie, talk to us about what's at stake.
Thank you, Maya. Can we give our sister Maya a round of applause for her leadership? Maya, I was sitting here, I was thinking about Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. and thinking about 2006 when we were able to get the Voting Rights Act reauthorized. But something happened in America. In 2008, we elected the first African American president. 2012, we elected, and by 2010, all of a sudden, all these new laws start showing up on the books after 2010. 2012, the black man got elected a second time, President Obama. By 2013, what happened? Shelby versus Holder. Here we are now, how many years later? 11 years later, fighting for this Voting Rights Act that always, always, always has been bipartisan. 4 years ago, we were almost there. We were almost there, but for a couple of folks who didn't want to go along with the program. We marched, we organized, we got locked up. We did what we had to do because we stand on the shoulders of Congressman John Lewis. We stand on the shoulders of Fannie Lou Hamer. We stand on the shoulders of all those who came before us. It is up to us. I know I'm gonna be okay. I'm so many decades around the sun now. But will my niece or nephew be okay? Will your niece or nephew, will your children be okay if they have to live under a regime that does not believe in democracy? This is what's at stake. Our children's future are at stake. We're going to fight this fight. We're going to push as hard as we can. And remember, there's always another election. And we're going to make sure that happens and that every voter has an opportunity. It's up to all of us to do what we need to do and all of our allies to do what we need to do to make sure that the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act is passed and passed now. Thank you. God bless you. Peace and power.
I also want to acknowledge the NAACP is here and the League of Conservation Voters, so many others. But before we leave, let's show them what we got. Whose democracy? Our democracy. Whose democracy? Our democracy. Whose democracy? Our democracy. What trouble? Good trouble. What trouble? Good trouble. What trouble? Good trouble. Whose house? Our house. Whose house? Our house. Whose house? Our house. Thank you.